and I'm just waiting for that to come up. And that's as we're recording the meeting, so I'll take this adherent for the meeting of the Executive Committee of the 22nd September 2021. Councillor Allison, I see that you're here. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I'm here.
I have apologies for Councillor Bradley. Councillor Brown.
Yes, present.
Thank you. I see that Councillor Chalmers is here. Councillor Convery is here. I have apologies from Councillor Cooper. Councillor Corbett is here. Councillor Craig is here. Councillor Devlin is also here, as is Councillor Dorman. Councillor Fagan is here, as is Councillor Faulkner. Councillor Hamilton.
Hi.
I see that you're here, thank you. Councillor Horsham is here. Councillor Logan is here. Councillor Loudon.
I am here.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe is here. Councillor McAdams is here. Councillor McCreary.
Yes, apologies, please.
Okay. Apologies from Councillor McCreary. I have apologies from Councillor McGuigan. Councillor Miller. Oh, I see that you're here, Councillor Miller. Thank you. Councillor Nayland is here. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Nelson, can I just ask if you're... Apologies. Councillor Ross is at the meeting. Councillor Shearer.
Here, Pauline.
Thank you. Councillor Wardhaw.
Here.
Councillor Wardhaw, I see that you're at the meeting. Councillor Wilson.
I'm here.
Councillor Greenshields, I understand that you're substituting for Councillor Cooper. Can you indicate that you're present at the meeting? Councillor Greenshields. No, nothing from Councillor Greenshields. Councillor Horn, I understand that you're substituting for Councillor McGuigan.
That's correct, yes, I'm here.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor MacDonald, I understand that you're substituting for Councillor Bradley.
That's correct, Pauline.
Councillor LeBlond, I understand that you are also here as a substitute.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, can I just confirm that you are here observing the meeting only? I think that will be the case that Councillor Ferguson, he doesn't have his interpreters, so he will be observing today. So with that, Chair, I'll pass back to you for the business of today's meeting.
Thanks very much, Pauline. Before we start the meeting, obviously everybody's aware that we do have a full council meeting after this morning, so I don't want to stifle discussion at all. I would just ask that if members and colleagues could keep their comments brief, and ask any question you want, but if we can try and keep our comments brief so we can get through the business timelessly. Thanks very much. We'll start with item 1, which is declaration of interest. Do we have any declaration of interest, Pauline?
None declared to be, Chair.
Oh, I see one hand up.
Councillor Dorman. Yes. We have Councillor Dorman.
Councillor Dorman.
Thank you, Chair. It's agenda item 4. I'm a member of Friends of Stonehouse Park.
Right, okay. If you want to remove yourself at that time for the duration of the item, you'll be called back in after, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You note that, Pauline?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. If there are no further declaration of interest, we'll go on to item 2, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Has any colleague any item to raise from the previous minutes? I'm not seeing any hands, so I would move it as a correct record of the minutes.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 3. This is the first of the monitoring items. It's the revenue budget monitoring for period 5. You can find this on pages 11 to 22, and I would ask Paul to give us a report on this, please. Paul?
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, everybody. The paper gives the Revenue Monitoring Commission to the middle of last month, and it has become the practice over the past 2 years. It probably splits into two halves, and the first part looks at COVID costs and COVID funding. So at the top of the second page of the paper, that's page 12, it starts off by giving an update on the forecast position for the year in terms of the amount of income that we've had in as government grant to deal with the costs of COVID against our estimated spend for COVID costs for the year. Now, the bit that I'm identifying has moved since last report, is picked up at 4.2. So what you've got there are some modest uplifts in the funding that we've received in relation to dealing with COVID costs. So you can see there a couple of amounts, £150,000 and £51,000. The paper then goes on, and this is at 4.3. You can see that the content in there in bold looks at how what we have spent has moved between period 4, which is the last paper you saw, and period 5. So in terms of the costs of COVID, right, that's gone up by £1.25 million between those 2 points. And there is detail in the appendices that takes you through what that relates to. Now, what the paper goes on to talk about next is social care costs. And this gets picked up at the foot of page 12 at 4.5. So it looks in detail at those, and it goes back to points that were made in the last report. And there are 3 principal issues, and you can see figures there against each of them, which are arising in relation to social care. So you've got users presenting with higher requirements. There's an increase in volume, and that's covered at 4.7. And then it finishes off by talking about additional care home placements. Now, this council is not unique in seeing these pressures across the country. So coming from these areas, you've got projected costs for the year of over £7 million. Now, what the paper then talks about is, OK, how are we dealing with those? And what's happening is these are being picked up through what you'll have seen referred to in previous papers and in this one is the mobilisation plan. So this is the route that we've got to recoup these costs from the government via an exercise that's carried out by NHS Lanarkshire. That's called the mobilisation plan. So that's how that's been absorbed this year. But the end of section 4 at 4.8, the point is made that if these costs are prolonged, right, that there will be an additional pressure that moves into year 2022-23. And in that year, I don't think at this point we are going to have that mobilisation plan facility to get those costs back. So what the paper then goes on to talk about, and this is sort of moving into the second part, right, is the position if you exclude those COVID costs and COVID income. And again, there's maybe, I suppose, as time goes by, you can see the folly in doing that because it's really all the one picture. And this point that's in here illustrates that. What we're showing at the bottom line at the moment is a £450,000 overspend, and that relates to children and family services. But what we're in a position of having to do is to say, OK, to what extent is that actually a COVID cost as well? And again, that's a position that's appearing right the way across the country, not just in South Lanarkshire Council. So in time, we may need to attribute more of our COVID funding towards that overspend that's arising within children and family services. The end of the paper ties off by just picking up some of the additional monies, and they are considerable, that have come through between periods 4 and 5, and these get picked up in the additional funding paper as well. So if I go back to the recommendations in the paper, the first couple are about noting the position, right, both to the end of the year and to the 13th of August, and also noting that position around the £450,000 overspend that we're looking at that point, and also the break-even position at present on the housing revenue account, which is covered in the paper as well. So, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, Paul. Does any colleague have any questions directed to Paul? I'm looking, I don't see any hands raised. So I'll move the recommendations in the paper.
Sorry, John, my hand thing isn't working.
Right, Alec, okay, not a problem. What would you like to ask?
A bit of clarification, Paul, on what we can spend the COVID money on, the extra COVID money on we're getting. For instance, one of the things that have been picked up locally is getting a number of questions about the garden waste uplift and coming to a time of the season when people are clearing their gardens out. Is that something we could use this COVID recovery money for, to put in a one-off service at the end of past the end of the summer and the autumn to help people tidy up their gardens, or would that be a misappropriation of these funds?
Right, okay, so Councillor Allison, I don't think it would be a misappropriation of the fund, but what I would need to go back to, and it's a point that gets made in here, and I've made it in the last couple of reports as well. It's not that we can turn up at the government and ask for more money for a specific purpose. At the moment, the government stance is that they've given us the money that they're going to give us on this, right? So there isn't further money that I know about that's going to come to address COVID pressures. And the sort of critical point I would make is these pressures, some of these things, and particularly that point I made around social care costs, I don't think they will end on the 1st of April 2022. They are still going to be there. But I don't have any other source of money coming in to put against those costs. So any money that you choose to spend on other things won't be there to offset those real pressures that I worry are going to be there in 2022-23.
Okay, yeah, no, fine. He's basically saying that it's a choice we could make, but he's advising not, because there are social, well, he's highlighted the social work cases, which I would indicate would be more important.
That would appear so.
I understand this answer.
Thanks very much. Councillor Convery, I see your hands up.
Thanks, Chair. Just to follow on for what Paul's saying, and it's very important, we should be making representation, Chair, because we are in a crisis. Social work's in a crisis. And if Paul's alluding to the fact, yeah, we're getting money and it's much appreciated, but does that money actually cover the costs that we need to cover? And that's the important issue we should be talking about. What are our outgoings? What is the income coming back in? And do the two of them square up? And if they don't square up, collectively, we need to put pressure where it needs to go to get more money. That's the plea I would make, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. I'll come back to Paul in this, but I know we're actively seeking additional funding through COSLA, but Paul might be able to just give us a wee bit more information on that. Paul?
No, I mean, to come back to your own point and to Councillor Convery's point, one of the points I was highlighting during that presentation was this isn't just a South Lanarkshire issue. And to come back to the point I was making, that's in here, what you're dealing with is a level of social care activity which is way above what we've got in the budget. Right? So there is money in the current year to pick up that gap, but I don't know that that's there next year. So as you say, that is being made through a number of routes, through directors of finance, through the chief executives group, Solace, right, through COSLA, to make the point that we are dealing with a surge, and that there does need to be a door open to local government moving forward, right, in respect to the issues that we're putting up with.
Thanks, Jerry. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4, which is capital programme update. You can find this in pages 23 to 32, and I would ask Paul to give us a report on this as well.
Right, thank you, Chair. This is showing that what we've got now is a revised programme of just under £83.33 million Now that's a drop of £2.1 million. The adjustments that are in there, which are included as Appendix 1, the big net movement that takes the programme down the way relates to the spend on the Bothwell Early Years Facility. So that's a drop of £2.7 million. Now, because of issues of timing, the point that's been made in the paper is that won't happen this year, it'll happen in year 2022-23. So that's the reason for that net drop from 85.5 down to £83 million. In terms of where we are, right, and what we've spent, the spend, and this is picked up at the top of page 24, is just behind where we would have expected to be. So no concerns at that point. But the paper does pick up on the fact, as we reported in last month, that we do need to keep an eye on the projects that are running, just given some of the pressures that are there around the market, right, and be mindful of them. And that might have an impact moving forward. We'll just need to take each case as it comes. On the housing programme, we've got a revised programme that we talked about in the last report of just over £94.3 million. There is, against the new build housing programme, a revision to that around projects around £14.75 million. And the reasons for that are given in a fair amount of detail at 5.2. So what that's leading to is a revised programme of £79.6 million. But the majority of this relates to timing. So again, in terms of spend, that's broadly where it would expect to be. It's just behind the programme. So in terms of the recommendations in the paper, what it's looking for is noting of that period 5 position and approval of the adjustments that you can see in the appendix to the paper, Chair.
Thanks very much, Paul. Does any colleague have any questions for Paul? I see Robert. Robert, your hand's up.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. One of the items in the appendix relates to the renewal of play parks, and this is the £298 million, in fact, extra that's coming from the Scottish Government on that heading, and that's against the manifesto commitment of renewing, I think, all play parks in Scotland. Now, I've really got 2 points to ask about this. One is in terms of the availability of the grant. I noticed that in the report that's going to come to committee later, it identifies that in Rutherglen and Cambuslang, there are only 17 play parks as opposed to 233 across the council area. Our need, if I can put it that way, is for more play parks. Most of the schemes in my ward don't have any play parks at all, or very limited provision. And I just wondered if there was any flexibility in terms of the report, in terms of what we can do with this, because some play parks are in good order, some are obviously less order and need renewal, some need additional equipment. Are we able to use this money or to use other monies that are released by it to provide more play parks or to provide additional equipment in existing ones? The other point I'd make, if I may, is that in terms of the actual money coming, it's actually fairly low relative to the actual aspiration. I think we all want children to have easy access to play equipment, but if you take maybe about £100,000 for a play park area, it's going to take something like 77 years to renew all 233 play parks in South Lanarkshire. That's really quite a long time, and not quite meeting the commitment that the Scottish Government made. There's really 2 points I'd like to make, Chair, but particularly on the Rutherglen and Cambuslang one and the ability to use this for wider purposes of renewal and additional play parks. I wonder what potential there is on that.
Thanks very much, Robert. I wasn't sure if I'd picked you up right when you started, when I thought you had said it was 298 million. If that was the case, we wouldn't have a problem. You know, but I'll hand over to Paul on this one.
Okay, Chair. I'll probably start off on this. The paper obviously refers to a paper that's going to go to the Community and Enterprise Committee. Councillor Brown's picked that up, so I'll maybe just hand off to Michael at a point in this. Just the item that's there on Appendix 1 does make note of the fact that there is a sort of two-stage process here in terms of this money coming from the government. So there is £60 million of funding, but the first £5 million, and that's that share of £298,000, is coming in year 2021-22. So there's, if you like, a degree of pump priming going on in terms of the money with this initial allocation. So I'll pass over to Michael in a second in terms of what the aspirations and plans are for that 298,000. I suppose a point I would make around the scale of that, and and providing a new play park, it is not going to make for a great deal of provision in terms of new play facilities moving forward. So with that, it'd be best handed over to Michael, who's obviously got the lowdown on how this is intended to be spent.
Thanks very much, Paul. Michael?
Yep, thanks, Chair. So just picking up on a couple of points from Councillor Brown, is our understanding is that the funding that is going to be brought forward is for renewal of existing play parks and not for new play parks. So that will then focus on the 233. Again, the issues where Councillor Brown is touching upon about where the greatest need is, our take on this is that we need to understand and do an assessment of the 233 in terms of what is required to bring them up to whatever is considered to be an acceptable standard. And there will be various standards across the 233, some needing more, some needing less, and some which are absolutely perfectly fine. And our proposal, which is going to Community and Enterprise next week, is that we need to undertake that assessment exercise by employing 2 officers. That will help us develop a needs assessment. And then I think we need to come back to the committee and agree a methodology of allocating the funds to ensure that we are directing it to the areas of most need and the areas that actually require to be upgraded. So at this point in time, Councillor Brown, I think it would be a bit premature to suggest where the funds would go. We need to understand what is needed, and then we need to get an allocation methodology. But just to pick up on the last point that Paul has made, I would totally agree. My estimation, notwithstanding everything that I've said, is that we have 233 players. Will the funding allow to renew all of them? My guess is probably not, but that's the funding that we have to work to, and then we have to prioritise where we put those funding allocation. So I'll just stop there, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Robert?
Chair, could I come back on that one? Thank you. Just 2 points, if I may, just following that one through. I'm appreciative, obviously, of the limitations of finance, but there's really 2 things that emerge out of that. One is, can we make representations through COSLA for the ability to use this on a wider basis, not just to renew play areas, but to provide new ones or new equipment where appropriate? Because there is obviously a degree of inequity showing through on those figures there between the different parts of the council area. And the second point is, when the officials do the review, can we look at not just what there is at the moment, what the actual need is in different areas? I think that's part of the thing. So we've got, albeit we may not be able to do it all with regard to this funding, we've got an idea going forward about where we need to be able to provide additional play area facilities so that the aspiration of all children having easy access to play facilities and play equipment is able to be effectively met in South Lanarkshire. I think there's really 2 points I'd like to ask that the committee might look at.
Robert, I can assure you from my point of view that as far as COSLA is concerned, my own political group and other political groups are looking at trying to find a way forward that gives us the necessary funding to do what we need to do as far as the play parks are concerned. So it's certainly high up on our agenda to try and do something, and I'm sure it is with other political groups as well.
And would you look at the issue of just what we need across the council? So when we're looking at the renewal thing, we just have an eye to where there's gaps, if you like, in provision at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Alec.
Thanks, Chair. Did a quick calculation there. I think it's under £13,000, even if we get a full allocation that we have for each play park. So no matter what we're talking about, the bottom line is that the funding made available does not meet the aspirations of what the policy was when it was intimated. And that is disappointing, that we're not going to get the funding required to do what it said in the tin. A couple of other quick questions. One, where are we with the Lark Hall Leisure Centre? Can we get an update on that one? And secondly, a part of this report at item 6 is contract prices and the uncertainty that we have at this time. can we have an assurance that we will have as early as possible a report on the housing service review of these contracts and the dangers and implications of price rises and what our options will be, so that we're not left to make decisions at the last minute?
Yeah, I think Paul's already said he'll try and keep us up to date, but I'll bring in Paul and Michael on that to see if they can give more clarity. Paul?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Chair. I mean, on Councillor Allison's point, right, we would look to, wherever possible, make sure that we're considering these issues promptly without leaving members in a position where they're having to make last-minute decisions. So you can take that as read, that we won't be tardy, right, around coming back on that. Just need to understand there is a sense in which this situation is developing all the time, right, and it depends on market reactions to contracts as they come up, right. So again, we'll continue to keep an eye on that, and we will make sure that we are keeping members on where that's going. Sorry, in terms of the Councillor Allison's other point, it's probably one, I think, where Michael's looking to come in, and I can see he's getting hand up just now.
Yeah, I think Michael and Danny, they want to say something. I'll bring in Michael first.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So in relation to Larkhall Leisure Centre, following the Council's decision to take that forward, officers are now actively assessing design options within the funding envelope that we've got. Also, site positioning, in our view, next to Larkhall Leisure Centre. So they're being actively worked on just now, and also how we consider consulting with the local communities. So at some point, probably in the next few months, Councillor Allison, we would probably give a better update, but I can give you assurance it's been actively worked on now. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Danny, do you want to come in on the housing side?
It was just to really follow up on the point Paul had picked up on there and Councillor Allison had made, Chair. At this point in time, we're not proposing any significant changes to the programme, other than if you look back to the points that Paul picked up there in 5.1, where there's been some slippage in the new build programme. But for the most part, that's not to do with materials or got to do with contract prices. So there has just been some delays due to legal agreements and the like. For the most part, our programmes for this year have been tendered and contracted. So we have built in fixed prices at this time, or we have got prices agreed with contractors. What we keep a close eye on is for the jobs that we've still got to price, then making sure that if we can, then we will alter designs or specifications to take out any risks in terms of both material deliveries and the impact they would have in the programme, or any risks in terms of contract prices as well. And you'll see it in the report itself in 6.2 that Paul's covered off. There are some options which we've got in there for contracts going forward as well, which will help us to mitigate these risks. So we constantly monitor the programme, and we're constantly adjusting our specifications and our kind of the way in which we are managing the contracts and managing the contractors, Councillor Allison, in order to mitigate that. So, but at this point in time, I don't see anything significantly going to blow us off course for the remainder of this year.
Thanks, Danny. Lindsay, I see your hands up.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to echo the points that have been made about how disappointing it is, the amount of funding that's been given to the council in regards to the play parks, and the amount of funding it will be given to the council in regards to the play parks. That it's been a hot topic in a lot of the community groups that I attend, because a lot of the kids have been playing in the park more now, because obviously there's not been much soft plays and stuff have been closed, and people have realised that maybe some of our play parks aren't adequate enough for certain age ranges, and they might have stuff for maybe older kids but not for very young kids. So I do know that there's people that lent their vote to the SNP due to this policy, and they'll be highly disappointed that this has not been carried through, and £13,000 not going to get you an awful lot. But I was just wondering, in terms of that, what park community groups will play in this, because I know that the council's current policy is that we don't renew play parks, but community groups can apply for funding and the council will facilitate that. So obviously there's community groups in my area that are looking to take forward this at this point in time. So I was just wondering what part community groups will take in that.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. Without getting too political, when you talk about SNP votes there, it would have been nice probably if your own party had voted for the budget at the Scottish Government. It might have had a wee bit more kudos instead of coming back and complaining about the results of the budget. But I would ask Paul to comment on that. Thanks.
For me. I mean, in terms of the amount of money that's there, obviously, as I pointed out earlier on, there's an amount of £60 million, there is an initial amount of £5 million. Michael's given a description of the content of the paper that's going to go to the Community and Enterprise Committee in terms of the proposed spending of that. And really, in terms of the money that we've got and the use, I think that's as much as I can say at this point.
Okay, Michael, I see you get your hand up.
Yeah, it's just simply to pick up on Councillor Hamilton's point there about with the community. Notwithstanding this funding, we'll still work with our community groups to access funding while we'll do this assessment exercise. I think that's a practical way to go forward. And in that vein, we've always worked with the community to develop ideas. And again, that will take time to do that, but that's why we want to add these additional resources so that we can look at the assessment, the need, and have the kind of methodology for allocating the funds. So hopefully that will give you the kind of assurance, Councillor Hamilton, that we've got a tried and tested method of doing that and it seems to work well. And so why wouldn't you continue to do that? Thanks.
Thanks very much, Michael. I see Councillor Loudon has her hand up and then Councillor McAdams. Councillor Loudon.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to pick up on that last point made there about other avenues for funding and opportunities for funding, I'd just like to extend my thanks again to the team for all of the work that they've been doing with Halfway Community Council and the subgroup that have been set up to support developments in our park as well. It's completely separate from this funding. We're talking funding of 100,000 has been given for redevelopment of the park, and it's been done in conjunction with the community as part of the community planning exercise, and we're all very excited to see how that turns out. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Katie. Monique.
Hi, thanks, John. It was just with regards to Michael's point. Michael, could you, from an equity as well as an equalities point of view, could you make sure that when the community groups are looking at the funding for the play parks that they take into the needs of wheelchair users? Because I've had a couple of people contact me recently about accessible play parks, and whilst we do have accessible play parks that you can get in if you're a wheelchair user, if you happen to be a child that is a wheelchair user, then we don't have facilities for them actually physically to be able to partake in. So with regards to them being able to use their wheelchair on a wheelchair swing. So if that could also be looked at to make sure if we maybe need to reach out to some of the charities, whether it's Spina Bifida or whatever else, that we actually take them into part of the consultation to make sure that we get a full overview, then that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks, Monique. Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. Just two brief comments is that members will be aware that the team strive to include inclusive equipment in any of the refurbishment, and we see that as a mainstream activity, but it does help to get that equity. And again, the point that Councillor McAdams is making is entirely right, is that the play area itself may be up to a good or very good standard, but to get access to it has some issues. So it's not only just the play area footprint, it's how you get to that is important as well. And again, that'll be part of the assessment exercise, and it will be part of consulting with our communities and our stakeholders. So absolutely, Chair, very good points. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Michael. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. We move on to item 5.
Chair, if you just let me get Councillor Doran back into the meeting, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Doran, can you confirm that you're back in the meeting, please?
Yes, Pauline, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We'll continue with the next item, which is item 5, additional funding from Scottish Government and other external sources on pages 33 to 36. And Paul, could you give us a report on this, please?
Okay, thanks, Chair. As you say, there's additional funding totalling £5.023 million. You can see the revenue element, which is 4.081 million. That's on page 35 of your papers, and the capital element is £942,000. See that page 36 of your papers. Again, there are amounts within those lists which we've referred to in earlier reports. But again, Chair, any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Thanks very much. I see Katie, you get your hand up.
Yep, thanks very much, Chair. I'd just like to welcome this report and the extra funding that's coming from the Scottish Government. But I'd like to take a moment to pick up on the additional funding for staff in particular, and just to take a moment to recognise the work of our education officers in this area over the last few years in promoting the sort of staff pipeline, for want of a better phrase, for nurturing new teachers that have come to us as part of the probationer scheme, for example, and investing in their future and supporting the talent and the skills which are out there. And similarly, in the past, we've had reports about recruiting, supporting, and training our support assistants as well. So this is very good news that will support that ongoing work, and it's good news for our young people as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Katie. Lindsay.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the point of additional teachers and support staff, is this additional money to the money already put through the Education Committee before recess, or is this the money for the 200 additional teachers that was discussed then?
Chair, I would need to go back and look at what it was that went through the Education Committee, right, to be certain of my answer. Right, this is the money which we've had formal notification of over the past month, right? So, again, my inclination would be it hasn't been reported to the Education Committee, but I would need to go back and see what appeared in previous reports.
You okay with that, Lindsay? I'll come back to you on that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Alec.
Couple of points, Chair. Very much pleased to see the UK government giving the council support for making applications to the Levelling Up Fund. This is going to be very important in the Clydesdale area. Glasgow City deal doesn't really affect us, neither does Edinburgh, and there's now Borderlands as well. Clydesdale's feeling a bit like the whole of Parliament in terms of support, and I think I'd like to hear from Kirland if there's any specific plans to be using this to actually fill that gap in and be able to support the Clydesdale area through the Levelling Up Fund. And secondly, the music tuition charges, again, pleased to see the funding there, but I'm unsure as to how that is going to be effective within South Lanarkshire, and how was that calculated, because I'm led to believe there are more different ways of implementing this than there are councils. Is it going to cover our music tuition costs, or how is it going to be allocated?
Thanks, Alec. Cleland.
Thanks, Chair. Just to remind members that last week, I believe we had a recorded awareness session around Levelling Up funding, which gives an indication of the types of bids that we would hope to bring forward for Levelling Up funding that would have an impact right across the council area, as opposed to a single site investment. This funding that's referenced in the paper is simply some enabling funding. It will give us a bit of capacity to put some officers to focus in on those future bids. Just by further advice, I sat in on a call with the UK Government Minister, Ian Stewart, last week, where local authorities were able to feed back their experience around the initial steps on levelling up. And one area in particular we were flagging is the all or nothing approach that we had in the first round, where it takes quite a lot of work and considerable effort to put together a £20 million bid, and you're either successful or you're not. And one area I believe the UK government are looking at is potentially introducing a two-stage approach to future rounds of levelling up, so that you put in an outline bid, excuse me, and if that gets past the kind of hurdle of assessment from the UK government, then you would go on and develop a fuller bid. So for members who haven't had an opportunity to benefit from that awareness session, it is recorded, and hopefully you have a chance to access it, an outline of how we would propose to take that forward. Alec, the second point was in relation to music instruction, and I see Lynn has her hand up. So, Chair, with your grace, I'll maybe pass over to Lynn to give a bit of detail around music instruction.
Yes,
thanks very much. Comment, Chair, just to Cleland's reply was before we move on. I mean, what I would like to see is some assurance that we are going to specifically look at the Levelling Up Fund as a way of being able to include Clydesdale within, slightly different within the growth areas. They're missing out in the growth areas. So I think we need to make sure that this fund, which is available to all of Lanarkshire, but that we use it to level up Clydesdale compared to the city deals that are all round about it, but not affecting it.
Alec, the project that we have in at the present time, although it's South Lanarkshire wide, concentrates quite considerably on the Clydesdale area. There was a very short timescale given by the UK government in order to get this through, both in its concept and its completion date. So far, we were supposed to have that decision in September or prior August. That decision is not yet through, which cuts down the time for the completion of the project. I'm only hoping that when Westminster finally get round to giving us a decision, that they'll also extend the time given to complete the project so that we can do this in the original time given rather than a shortened time space. So, you know, there's pros and cons. Although we welcome the money, we would welcome a decision so that we can go on with this project. Thanks very much. I'll bring in Lynn to give us some answer on that, and then I think Cleland still got his hand up. I'll bring Cleland back in. Lynn?
It was just to kind of give you a brief update that in terms of the money that's been aligned to us this year for the music tuition charges, that should see us, you know, be able to fund the wiping out of any charges. The one thing maybe to note is that it only covers our current level of service delivery. So if demand was to increase because charging has now been removed, that's the subject of further discussion. And I believe there's discussion still with COSLA and the Scottish Government about long-term funding and to continue to monitor the music tuition in that regard. Okay.
Thank you very much. Cleland?
Yeah, just very quickly on Councillor Allison's point, Clydesdale is an integral part, obviously, of South Lanarkshire. The approach that we're looking at for the majority of potential bids is projects that would impact in all of our areas. So Clydesdale would be part of that thinking. So it's the reassurance you're looking for, Alex. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Robert, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just coming back to the school, the teachers issue. The teacher issue has been plagued a little bit over the years by a mismatch between workforce planning, if you like, numbers of teachers going through the colleges, and the outcome in terms of what teachers are able to be employed with the funding in schools. I just like to be clear that we're at the stage now where we can actually make use of the teachers in the sense that there are teachers to be recruited, not just generally across the board, but also in specific specialities. I've certainly had a number of issues over the years, not currently, I'm bound to say, where there's been complaints of parent councils, you can't get a maths teacher or English teacher or a teacher in a particular speciality or whatever. Is the teacher availability likely to enable us to meet this in the way that is intended and within a reasonable time? Thanks, Chair.
Lynn?
Hello again. Yep, I can try and answer that. In terms of the additional funding that we got for the teachers, there was 64 additional permanent teachers coming on stream. Round about half of that's going to the primary, some of it will go to ESN, and an allocation will go to the secondary schools. So we had already, with previous money which had come from the government, temporary money to help with recovery, had taken on a number of additional contracts. So we're now in a position to be able to make them permanent and then to step to the backfill of other people who were either on our temporary contract list or our supply contract list, to bring them on and see about backfilling those contracts to allow the 64 permanent posts to become live, if you like. In terms of the secondary schools, we have allowed an allocation to each secondary school to recruit either again from the temporary contracts from area cover or external. So you're right, there are a couple of areas, I believe, in the subject specialisms where we are short. There's an external advert going out at the September weekend to do another round of recruitment to see if we can match up the need for certain specialisms that we don't quite have enough of yet. The schools are doing what they can in terms of any temporary doing more hours, any part-timers in school in that particular subject who are also willing to do more hours and to try and cover that gap.
Thanks very much. Monique?
Hi, thanks, John. It was just to say, obviously, I welcome any additional money that the council gets. That goes without saying. It was actually to do with the education part. It was the 100 days commitment. I welcome the opportunity for people that could have afforded the piece of equipment but couldn't have afforded the actual lessons, that then it means that they can now basically get the lessons. The only problem is we still haven't actually looked for the people that are most disadvantaged, that can't actually afford to either buy or hire the piece of equipment. A violin basically for the year is £250. So not everybody can actually afford to actually get the piece of equipment in the first place. So I think that whilst I welcome this, which obviously, of course I do, I think that we need to actually look a wee bit further. So if that is something that can then be taken back, Lynn, to COSLA, and to say, yes, we welcome this and thank you very much, but the people that are most disadvantaged are still basically most disadvantaged because they can't afford the piece of equipment. And it means potentially what we have got a situation is people that actually could afford lessons and the piece of equipment are now getting free lessons, and it means that the people that couldn't afford lessons and couldn't afford the equipment still aren't getting looked after. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Monique. I can't see any other hands raised in this, so I'm going to move the recommendations.
I'll second, Chair.
Right, are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to items for decision. And item 6 is the recommendations referred by the Finance and Corporate Resources Committee, pages 37 to 40. And I would ask Paul to give us a report on this, please.
Okay, Chair, this is about 3 reports that have been to the Finance and Corporate Committee. So that they're there, the Treasury Management Activity Report for 2021, the 2021 Treasury Management and Prudential Code Indicators, and the Council's Investment Report for 2020-21. So these first 2 are referred on here, and the Annual Investment Report gets referred here as well, but it gets referred on to the Council because that's a legal duty that it has to go to the full Council. So that's really what the recommendations are asking. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Does any member have a question? Can't see any hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendation.
I'll second, Chair.
Have we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 7, proposal to conduct a consultation to align the catchment area of Newton Farm and Hallside primary schools and to alter the secondary school. Those pupils in the rezoned area would attend from Uddingston Grammar to Cathkin High. The report's on page 41 to 48. And I would ask Lynn to give us a report on this, Lynn.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a bit of a mouthful, the name of the report there, but just to take you through the content of what we're trying to do here, really, but the purpose is to provide information on the pupil projections for Newton Farm and for Hallside, and to seek approval from committee this morning to undertake a statutory consultation on a proposed catchment realignment between these two schools. In terms of background at section 3, and the proposal that we're bringing to you today, you will see Appendix 1 has the existing catchment areas of both Newton Farm and Hallside, and also the proposal for the realignment area, which is the Westburn area and also part of the Newton Community Growth area, which would realign from Newton Farm Primary School to Hallside Primary School. So you'll know, I'm sure, within the area that Newton Farm Primary School is a new school that's been there for 4 years now, and since that time has shown growth in pupil numbers way and above the normal projected pupil generation that we see for housing developments across South Lanarkshire. In contrast to that, the role of Hallside Primary School has been decreasing over a number of years, and the school is currently operating with spare accommodation, and we could therefore readdress the balance, if you like, of the pupil population in the area, and on a best value approach, make sure that we are utilising our school estate in the best way possible. Paragraphs 3.5 and 3.6 just give you some current numbers there about the size of the school in terms of classrooms for both of them, the number of pupils you could potentially accommodate, assuming each class is an average of 30 pupils in a class, what the current role is, and acknowledging that Newton Farm is at a pressure point, if you like. We're currently using 4 mobile teaching units now. We had 2, we've increased that to 4 this year. With the extension coming next year, a 7 classroom extension, that will help to ease the pressure on that particular school. 3.6 demonstrates in the Hallside area there's 16 classrooms available, which in theory could take 480 children across the school, and the current roll is only 262. So we did carry out an options appraisal looking at different areas, other schools in the area that maybe had accommodation, but Hallside had the largest spare capacity in its school to be able to see a catchment review being undertaken. We looked at the geography of the area as well to try and get something that makes sense in terms of proximity to both schools. And the proposal that we're laying out, of course, is attached in Appendix 1 for you to see. Probably to highlight, paragraph 4.4 is a summary of where we would be if we went ahead with the proposal. With the extension, which is due in 2022 for Newton Farm, that would see Newton Farm increase to having 21 general primary school mainstream classrooms, which gives a capacity of 630. Our estimate pupil rolls are shown there between 2025 and 2028 would be 666 and 601. So maybe just slightly over for a short period, and then should dip back down to be within the new capacity that Newton Farm would accommodate. We did feel when we moved forward with the extension that a 21 classroom was probably the largest we could fit on that site. You have to also take account of ancillary school accommodation, the size of the dining area, etc. So 21 is the maximum we would go to, which would give us a capacity of 630. Of course, Hallside has capacity for 480, and you can see in that table how that would help to address the balance of pupils in the area. But as I said, we could see that for a short period of time, Newton Farm might still exceed its capacity, and we may have to do more of the same of what we're doing just now, which might be some temporary accommodation or some additional class teachers until we reached the peak and came back down into numbers which are manageable within that state. In 4.6, there is some information there about the impact on secondary roles, and you will note that moving the zoned area that we're proposing, the Westburn and the CG part of the CGE area, would have an implication and change in the secondary school from Uddingston Grammar onto Cathkin High School. So that is only just for the proposal of the rezoned catchment areas. It's not a complete catchment change. And we've already had some parents asking some questions because the schools have been letting families know that we were coming to committee today. We do have developer contributions, and should all known housing developments go ahead, that can assist in any works, any internal adaptations, etc. that we may need to do. Uddingston Grammar, we have already commissioned a feasibility study to start to look at accommodation requirements and indicative costs. And similarly with Cathkin High, we have developer contributions available in that area as well for that school, which could help us manage a projected increase in roll as a result of any catchment change in later years. Probably the other thing to note is when we move straight down to other implications in Section 8, of course, this is just a proposal. It goes to the statutory consultation. So pupils, parents, staff as well, and the other statutory consultees would have the opportunity to make their views known about that proposal. At 8.1, we are saying that we would start the consultation late September, early October. And if approved, this would come into effect for the August 22 admissions. But as it says at 8.3, it's probably important to remember for some families who already have children at school that we do have a period where if you already have a sibling in Newton Farm, for example, maybe someone who's in primary 3, if you have a younger child coming on, then you can continue that education for your younger children for a period of time. So you don't have children going to, to different schools in the local area. So that dispensation is still there for families who already have children attending these schools. Okay. I think that's the general sort of background. So really it is in the recommendations that we are asking that the committee approve a statutory consultation under the Schools Consultation Act to undertake a proposed change to the catchment areas of Newton and Hallside primaries to help balance the pupil numbers, and therefore to then alter the secondary schools catchment areas for those pupils in the area alone from Uddingston Grammar to Cathkin High School. Okay. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Lynn, for that report. I was going to ask if colleagues had any questions, and I see already Councillor Loudon has her hand up. Katie?
Hi, thank you very much, Chair. I would just like to say personal thanks to Lynn for all of the information which she's provided to all of the local elected members on this subject in recent months. I'm one of the local members for this area, and the time that she's taken to meet with us and discuss it. There has been a particular concern over Hallside Primary and what a drop in the role there could mean for staffing. So I think looking at this situation is very sensible. And with the investment in the school in recent times, it's a beautiful building, and the school and its staff are a real asset to our community. From speaking to the Parent Council and parents over the past year, I've been able to relate some of their concerns back to the resource, and I'm pleased to see that we're making progress in this consultation, and it's only right that we gather the thoughts of parents in the area in this way. So thank you, Lynn.
Thanks, Katie. Councillor Devlin, Maureen?
Right, thanks, John. Thanks, Chair. It's just all I want to do is just ensure that everybody has an opportunity to be able to get involved with the consultation. The reality of it all is we haven't been good in cases. We haven't been good practically across the board when it comes to education, more so now because of having access to public meetings, and some of it might be done, online. So I just want to ensure that everybody has an opportunity. And again, because it affects within my own ward, I just sincerely hope there is a good input down with the views of the parents from Uddingston Grammar, because you know yourself that bounds to local authorities for the catchment areas for the north and south. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Maureen. Councillor Nayland.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick query for Lynn. You said that there'll be a dispensation for a period of time for younger siblings. When the older siblings at the school leave primary school, will the younger sibling be required to relocate to the other primary school, or will they be allowed to complete the primary education at the same school?
Thanks, Lynn. I'll bring in the other Lynn at the present time who can answer that, and obviously Maureen's question as well. Lynn?
Yes, just the second question there. Yes, if they enrol in Newton Farm because their elder sibling is there, once the elder sibling goes to high school, then the youngest child continues on with their education for the full term. There's no changing over in the middle of the year, if anything. Okay, that answers that question. Going back to Councillor Devlin, yes, there will be consultation that goes further. It will go into the Uddingston Grammar community, if you like. So both the head teachers at Cathkin High and Uddingston Grammar are aware of this consultation. And although it primarily obviously affects people that live in that area, Uddingston Grammar School will be a statutory consultee because they are affected. So we should be doing the same communication flow, the same letters out to parents and the same invite to meetings, whether they be online or whether they be face-to-face, that they should have the same level of inclusion. So we'll make sure that that happens. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. I see that Councillor Loudon has a hand up. Katie?
Thanks, Chair. It was just also to touch very briefly on Councillor Devlin's point, and thanks, Lynn, for that reassurance about the consultation. Again, as a local member, I just wanted to say that there has been a huge amount of chat about this recently, especially over the last couple of weeks, not only in formal situations like the Parent Council, but residents groups and social media, informal groups of parents and social media, group chats. It's received a huge amount of attention. People are pleased to see that this is coming forward. So they've got an opportunity to share their views, and I have no doubt that there'll be a great deal of enthusiasm for taking part. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Katie. And Monique?
Aye, thanks, Chair. Lynn, it was in regards to the points 4.9 and 4.10 when you had highlighted it was with regards to developers' contributions. We know that the planning applications are up by 25%, and to such an extent that the department is under great pressure to do with lack of staff and other issues. It's also been reported in the papers about lack of timber and also lack of building supplies, for example, concrete. All these things are going to have a knock-on effect on the builders being able to build and to be able to stay within the timescales that we would have expected. That meant that would have then allowed the developers' contributions to be handed over. What is the knock-on effect to the developers' contributions that are expected for Uddingston Grammar and similarly to do with Cathkin High School? And do you believe that that this is still online for you to be able to get the contribution in the time that you would actually need it?
I think I'll probably be better bringing in Michael on this one. Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If that's okay with Lynn. Again, the points Councillor McAdams is making is correct, and essentially reflects how the market goes through highs and lows, and that's always expected through economic increases that we're seeing at this point in time as we come out of the pandemic, which, to be honest, nobody really had predicted such a sharp increase, and it's good to see the kind of recognition, the pressure that is on planning services who are trying to do their best to manage that. But I think what Lynn is saying is that looking into the kind of medium to longer term, we have to plan for the likelihood of these houses being built, and experience tends to show, Councillor McAdams, that through the highs and lows of the economy, that the housing sites will be built out in South Lanarkshire. That's certainly my experience over a good number of years, and we need to plan for that to happen. So I think what Lynn is essentially bringing forward in this report is to have a plan that the housing developments will actually be built out as we anticipate them to be. And as I say, the experience tends to show that's what actually happens. So hopefully that answers the question, gives a wee bit of reassurance that the contributions will come in and that this plan will be implemented over a period of time. Thanks, Chair.
Can I have a subsequent, please?
Yes,
It was just, Michael, just to go back in that then. So the planning department is under strain, so that's fine. Well, not fine, that's a shame, and it is recognised. With that in tow, and for the fact that there are an increase in the amount of applications, that is going to have a knock-on effect on your staff for them to be able to process the applications, therefore for the legals to work with Section 75s, it's going to be your planning officers to work with SEPA who have been hacked by Russia. There's a lot of things that are actually going to be out with your control. So it's just to try and get a proper picture for this, because pandemics tend to last between 5 and 7 years, because that's what the last one did. So we're only like a year and a half in. So it's to try and actually get a firm handle on this, because we do recognise the fact that it's not just your department's under strain, it's SEPA and it's other outside organisations. So are you then saying that even though the stuff that's going on in your department and out with, that this isn't going to have a knock-on effect onto either of these contributions coming in or this summary of contributions coming in?
I think we're straying off the point a wee bit, but I'll bring Michael back in to give an answer on this.
I'll try and keep this brief. The sites where the contributions are coming from are allocated sites within the local plan. So as we know, that takes a period of time, so that isn't there. They've also got planning permission in principle. So again, that process isn't there. They have concluded Section 75 agreements, so that process is in place. They then bring forward the detailed applications, and there may be some resourcing issues that Councillor McAdams is suggesting there, but it will be over a period of time. So as we sit here today, Chair, I've got assurance that the sites will come forward, and the planning service, as it's always done, will facilitate those sites getting consented and development will come forward. So again, the points that Councillor McAdam is raising is essentially, do you recognise the risks and do you think those risks are manageable? And the answer to that is yes and yes. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Cleland.
Thanks, Chair. I just need to make the comment, as a public meeting, the cyber attacks on SEPA, which were significant and were related to a ransom demand, are currently under investigation. There is no evidence or conclusion that points to state involvement from any foreign national country. So we just need to put that on record. Thank you.
Thanks, Cleland, for that advice. Okay.
Chair, can I apologise then? That was definitely not my intention. That was something that I had read in the media. So, Chair, I completely apologise and I withdraw my statement that I had said.
Thanks, accepted. I'm sure we all can't rely on everything we read in the media. So, as politicians, we should be very aware of that. Thanks very much for withdrawing that, Mike. Alec, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, John. Just quickly, following on what Councillor Devlin and Councillor Loudon were saying, this is a consultation, no problem with it. But what I think is very important is that we need to take in all aspects of what's happening and not just educational ones, and looking for confirmation or confirmation that will happen, that we can identify any consequences, whether they be intended or unintended, and they are taken into account, and it's not simply an educational evaluation.
Your comments are well noted, Alec. Make sure that education and planning take that into consideration. Thanks very much. I see no other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendation.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thanks very much. We now move on to item 8, which is Queen's Platinum Jubilee 2022, pages 49 and 50. And can I ask Kate to come in on this one, please?
Thank you, Chair. As you say, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee takes place in June next year, marking a UK record of 70 years on the throne. The national plan is for a 4-day holiday to mark this historic event, and to achieve this within South Lanarkshire, we're proposing moving the 2nd May holiday to Thursday the 2nd of June and adding on the 3rd of June, the Friday, as an additional leave day, fixed for some employees and floating for those who have to work on that day. There will, through the period, be a reduced service to the public, as you would expect. And as you'll see in the report, we're recommending that the Council provide that reduced service on Friday the 3rd of June. We move the public holiday that's scheduled for Monday the 30th of May to Thursday the 2nd of June, and that we add on that additional fixed annual leave day for employees on Friday the 3rd of June. So it's a short report, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that report, Kay. Does any colleague have any questions on this? Can't see any hands up, so I'm going to move the recommendation.
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 9, which is the standing orders and contracts, amendments in relation to the quick quotes. It's on page 51 to 56, and members of the committee should have received a further report on this item, clarifying points raised by leaders at our Monday morning meeting. So everybody should have this additional report, and I'll get Paul to give a report on the standing orders.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and thanks for pointing out that additional note that we around this morning, hopefully providing a wee bit of clarity and comfort around the role of community benefit in this. As a council, you've endorsed the community wealth building approach and approved a strategy back in March. So this report is about progressing what the council does and meeting the aims of that strategy and how it buys. So in part, what we're looking to do is to take advantage of flexibility that's offered by a change in Scottish Government procurement regulations. So if I can take you to the second page of the paper, right, and I've probably got down to section 3.6, the change centres around using a process that's called Quick Quote. And Quick Quote, and what it means, is laid out there at section 3.6. So what it's about is a streamlined, quicker procurement process that can be targeted at local businesses and SMEs. Last year, in terms of the change that I referred to on the Scottish Government regulations, that's picked up at 3.7. So the Scottish Government revised its guidance, right, and it does that through what you get there, which are referred to as construction policy notes, to encourage the use of Quick Quote. So the next section, right, or sections 4 and 5, take you through what the current position is in section 4 and what the proposed changes are per this paper. And we need to do those changes by changing the standing orders. So that would happen by approving this report and then be taking a small summary report onto the council this morning and getting that approved there. So just to focus on this section, in terms of what happens now, Quick Quote can be used at the moment for contracts to procure for goods, services or works between £5,000 and £50,000. And what we do is we get 5 quotes, and at the moment we say 2 of those quotes should come from local SMEs. And there's a definition given there of what a local SME is. Now the proposed change is that we increase the current financial limit for procuring works contracts, and that's by and large things for construction works dealt with through housing and technical or through community and enterprises roads. That threshold be increased from £50,000 to £2 million. Now, a point I would note there at 5.12. This doesn't bind us into doing that. Other procurement routes will continue to be used where that's appropriate. The other part of the change that we're looking for is around the quotes from local SMEs. And as I said a second ago, at the moment we say when we're using Quick Quote that we look for 2 of those quotes to come from local SMEs from a total of 5 quotes. And what's suggested there at 5.2 is that the minimum number of quotes to be obtained from local SMEs where we use Quick Quote is increased to 4 from the current 2. And that's in situations where those SMEs exist locally. And I go back to that point that I emphasised a second ago. Well, that isn't the case. You're not bound into doing that. Now, what the paper then goes on to talk about are some of the advantages around this. Part of it is around the pace of procurement, and that's picked up at the top of page 53. The point's also made that this will allow more higher value tender opportunities to be available to South Lanarkshire businesses. And that point again is picked up and developed at 6.3, where we make the point that the increase in the minimum number of quotes from local SMEs should allow local companies to bid for more contracts from the council. And this, as it says there at 6.4, is absolutely in line with that community wealth building strategy and developing the local supply base and growing the local economy. And we do go on to pick that up in section 10. There's an opportunity to grow the market locally for these contracts. And the points there made that, through Michael's department, economic development supported by the supplier development programme will work with the construction sector. Remember, this change around the thresholds is framed at those types of works to assist with increasing the awareness of contract opportunities and capacity. So again, there is a tie-in here with how we look to develop local business. So if I can go back to the recommendations to the paper, it's really around these changes to the standing orders. And that's about that increase in the limit from £50,000 to £2 million for those works contracts, and an increase in the requirement to seek quotes from small, local and medium-sized enterprises, taking that to 4 from 5 where it was previously 2. So again, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Paul. From my personal view, I welcome this report. At the Community Wealth Building Forum, getting procurement right was highlighted as a major step in our strategy, and I'm happy to see that officers have been able to come back with such a quick win, which, as you say, will increase the number of local businesses which will be able to benefit from council contracts, and also the local economy and communities will also benefit through the idea of more employment and training. So I'm hoping that the committee do see the benefit of this and vote for it. I'll look for Joe. Joe, I see your hands up. Can I have your question?
Sorry, Paul actually dealt with my question during his remarks. So all I'll do is say that it is important to see the community wealth building agenda taken forward, and I think my question was dealt with, so you could move on.
Thanks, Joe, for keeping it brief. Alec.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, very much welcome this as well as something that we think is important, getting local businesses involved, and 90% of the paper here is fine. There is concern about this huge jump from 50,000 to 2 million in the quick quote. Understand why it's been done, but I'm led to believe when this type of thing has been done in industry, it has had unintended consequences. And I think it's something that we should be keeping under review, that we need to report back on how that has affected local businesses. Has it changed that demographic and created problems that we didn't think about? Would it be possible to add a recommendation in here that I'm not sure what period of time would be appropriate, but we come back with a review of how this had operated and has it created any problems?
Yeah, well, that's fine, Alec. I don't mind us having a look at this as we go forward. Obviously, we will be reporting back all of the time as far as Community Wealth Building Commission is concerned. So certainly we'll note that and take it forward. Maureen, I see your hands up.
Aye, thanks, Chair. It's just really on the point at missed my point here. Item 10, when it talks about the supplier development programme, I think we're agreed that businesses will come forward if they're supported and they're encouraged to come forward. So I think the role of the supplier development programme and Business Gateway are critical here. So anything we can do to work and to encourage those organisations to work better together to make sure that our local businesses are prepared to come forward and bid for the contracts. And as the Council's recent representative on supplier development programme, happy to support that in whatever way I can.
Thanks, Maureen. Alan, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a small point. Paul says the community wealth building's been ongoing. Last week, I happened to be at the shopping units at Clarkwell Road and Hill House, and there's an empty shop there which has been acquired by somebody, and I happened to notice a painter going in, and they've got overalls Bathgate painters. Why would we be getting painters for Bathgate to paint up a unit if we're encouraging local community businesses? Somebody answer that.
Well, is it a council property, Alan? And I presume that if it's not a council property, the guy can employ people from wherever he wants, and maybe the Bathgate overalls were a previous. I mean, it's a wee bit spurious to bring that up, but certainly I'll bring Paul in.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know. There's a whole number of factors in terms of the shops in Clarkwell Road I would need to have a look at before I could give an honest answer in that one. See, just to focus on Councillor Allison's point, right, around the wish for a review of the position, that's absolutely factored into what we're talking about doing here, Councillor Allison. So what we do have are 6 monthly and annual procurement reports, and we'd look to try and target how this is being progressed and to ensure that it's not got any unintended consequences through those reports. And we'll be reporting and looking at the output of a review activity more frequently than that at an officer level. In terms of scale, what we're going to be dealing with here, we absolutely have got the capacity to look at it and look at how it's developing, right, and pick up these unintended consequences early. One other sort of word of comfort, because of that Scottish Government change, there are other councils looking, right, to make this kind of move. So at the moment we know of 9 other councils who have got an upper limit which is in excess of £500,000. These are councils that are far smaller than us, right, which is 10 times the limit we are currently working to. So I do think this is the progressive thing to do. But I would make the point, I take your point, that we will monitor and report back on how this is progressing.
Thanks very much, Paul. Alan, your hand's still up. Is it a legacy hand?
No, it's not a legacy hand. I just want to come back. It seems to be quite flippant here. I can assure you, Joanne Forbes dealt with the lease of that shop, and I know the person that's got it, and they were waiting to get in, and to see somebody with Bathgate printers up in Hull House, if we know of MD for house or that, or bring me to tell us what the position is.
Well, I can get a report on it. I see Danny's got his hand up. Danny.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Sadly, I don't have the position on every job that we're getting organised across the council area, but I'll certainly make contact with Councillor Faulkner, get more details, and I'll get back to him. Thanks.
Right. Thanks very much. Paul, you've still got your hand up.
Just the only other point I was going to make around this is that, on these situations around procurement for works of this type, this change is absolutely meant to encourage local business to pick up work like that, if that is council work. And I wasn't trying to be flippant. The only point I was making is I genuinely don't know what the background is for that accommodation. But this is intended to encourage work of that type to be done by local business.
Thanks very much. Danny, you've still got your hand up. Is it a legacy hand?
That's definitely a legacy, Chair. Sorry about that.
Right, thanks very much. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendation.
I'll second, Chair.
Thanks very much. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Colleagues, I'm aware that we've been in the meeting for far more than an hour now. However, there are only 2 items for noting to go, so I'm going to continue with the meeting in the hope that we can get through it quite quickly, and then we can have a break before the full council meeting. So I'll carry on with item 10, which is council complaints report on pages 57 to 68, and I would invite Kay to give us a report on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I will be brief. This is our annual report on complaints, and actually it's a really good position that we've achieved as a council. We perform millions of transactions over the year, and in this case we've dealt with just 696 complaints. That said, we're open to complaints as an opportunity for improvement and learning, and you'll see that within the content of the report. I think the item I would highlight in terms of some of the stats round about our performance this past year is that in terms of timescales, unsurprisingly, we have seen some impact through the pandemic, particularly in the first quarter of the year when we were still trying to get onto a regular footing with responding to complaints, etc. That has picked up through the rest of the year. So in terms of another item within the report, in terms of customer satisfaction, I would just draw elected members' attention to the fact that that is based on a very small number of respondents, only 10 in this particular case, and I'm asking the committee to note the content of the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Kay. I see that Monique has her hand up. Monique.
Hi, thanks for the report. It was just had a couple of questions. I just wanted to know, have all the council employees been in a complaints handling workshop? Also wanted a copy of the complaints procedure and all the relevant timescales to be sent out to myself and any other elected members that want them. I know that the Labour group want that. so that if we've got any further questions that we want answered at a later date, then it gives us the opportunity to actually look through the procedures. And also, I just wanted to ask, do you believe that every department is carrying out the procedure in the same way, ensuring consistency? And depending on the answers, whether I'll have a follow-up or not, John.
Thanks very much, Monique. Kay?
Thank you, Chair. It's certainly pretty straightforward. I can send you a link to the complaints handling procedure and the timescales that are contained within that, so I can get that circulated. In terms of employee training, customer care is one of our core elements, and depending on the role that people carry out will depend on the level of training.
You're right. That's a big job.
It is within that. Sorry, I've lost the thread there. Monique, you had a third question?
Yeah, the third one, Kay, thank you, because you've answered the first two. That was great. It was just, do you believe that every department is carrying out the procedure in the same way, ensuring consistency?
Thank you, Councillor McAdam. We are aligning our different methods of recording. So as much as we can, we are assured that people are dealing with complaints in the same way. Now, we are a large organisation, and I touched on earlier on there about the large number of transactions that we have. So I think we've got that in as much in alignment as we possibly can. But if there are specific issues that you would like addressed or you're aware of, I would be happy to hear about them.
That's fine. It was two things, Kate. It was just that there was constituents that had contacted me, and it covers two resources. One is education and one's planning, where they weren't putting in a complaint. They were basically like looking to get a situation rectified, that they were raising an issue that could have been dealt with informally. And both times it was put forward as a complaint, even though they had said it's not a complaint, but it was a case of, no, sorry, it's been logged now as a complaint, so it's now a complaint. And one of them jumped and wasn't even a stage 1, it just jumped straight to stage 2. So I would say that whilst this report is good, and it's good that we're reporting on it and that we're following a procedure, there is not consistency across the departments, and there needs to be further training so that it means that the departments catch that when something is a complaint that needs to go through the formal process, and when somebody is raising an issue that can actually be dealt with, because then it means that you get the desired result, whether it's an actual complaint or whether it's something that can get rectified. And I think we shouldn't get caught up in the numbers with that. It should be about customer satisfaction. And thank you.
Thanks, Monique. Councillor Allison.
Monique's third point was one I was going to raise, but the second one is the complaint that I most often get, though, is constituents using the council portal, then not hearing anything afterwards as to whether there has been an issue, is it being sorted, what's happening. And I think we actually need to make sure that, one, when people do report through that, they get a response, but also make sure that it is enacted on by the particular resource, because that is the main issue that we hear, that they don't know what's happening. And sometimes when you then go to the resource, they don't know about it either.
Thanks very much, Alec. Kay, will you take that on board?
Certainly will, Chair.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to move the recommendation.
I'll second, Chair.
Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 11, retirement of Executive Director, Community and Enterprise Resources. The report's on page 69 to 70. And again, if Kay can give a report on this, please.
Thank you,
John,
Chair.
before Kay starts, sorry, Maureen's Evelyn's text to say, can we let you know that she's been thrown out of the meeting and she's trying to get back in, and apologies for interrupting.
Thanks. We'll hold on for a second until she gets back in. Pauline, can we see if we can try and get her back into the meeting?
Certainly, Chair.
Any luck, Pauline?
I'm sending her another request to join, and I've alerted the IT support to the fact, and they're going to call her. So at the moment, we're in the process.
I mean, we only have one item to go, and it's an item for noting. I'm not sure that we want to hold up the meeting.
Just carry on, John.
So I think we'll carry on, and Maureen can always catch up with the result later on.
John, I'm back in. It's okay.
Okay, Maureen, thanks very much. Kay, can you give us a report on this, please?
Yeah, certainly, Chair. So it's a short report which is fairly self-explanatory, just to highlight the forthcoming retirement of the Executive Director of Community and Enterprise Resources and to alert the committee to the start of a recruitment process. And as you say, the report is for noting, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm not going to say very much about Michael retiring at the moment. I'm sure we'll all have an awful lot more to say on that further down the road, except it's a big loss to the council. But if any colleague has a question to ask on this report, I'm not seeing any hands up. So I'll take it that I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. That concludes the items for this committee. It's now 25:02. I would recommend that we put back the start of the full council meeting to